Something I've been wondering for the last days is, should I play the Sicilian Najdorf against 1e4? Now, it's definitely kind of tempting to play something like the Najdorf, because it's one of these openings that it's not just very flexible. It allows you to play e5 and get that space in the center without running into problems with bishop b5, like in the Caruana Nakamura game from the 2024 candidates. And it also has a lot of counterattacking potential. You can also play subs with e6 as well as e5. There may even be some positions where you can switch back to a dragon with g6. And a lot of the times you can have getting this up with like b5, bishop b7, knight d7, where you just develop your queenside pieces very harmoniously. Another advantage also of playing Sicilian Najdorf from my point of view is I already have quite a bit of experience with it, and have had pretty good results with it in the past. However, my theoretical knowledge is a little bit rusty on it, so it would be quite a bit of work entailed in order to sort of make it work for black. But let's just not just talk in generalities, but also discuss some specific moves and where I might feel maybe more comfortable or less comfortable in some positions. So, if you're enjoying this series, if you're enjoying this video, do make sure to leave a like, and also to consider subscribing. That way you'll be able to access more of my videos, like getting them notified in your feed. Actually, the way to make sure of that is just to make sure you tap the notification bell and set the notification settings to all. That will ensure you don't miss out on any of my video trainings. So, I'm going to start with bishop to e3. In the lead chess database, see bishop g5 seems to be the most common move by a small margin, but when I was recently looking into e4 again and looking to play e4 as white, I decided that I was going to play the English attack and basically play it this sort of way of the white pieces. Now, the system I used to find the most annoying to face from white's point of view was this h5 line. I remember what I was going to do was I was going to play like knight d5, and this was the sort of thing I was kind of leaning towards from white's side, where I had a friend who had shared with me some interesting ideas of going bishop e2 and just kind of playing like the old main line. But I do feel like those sort of positions are fairly comfortable for black. Like you just go b6, not letting him go knight a5 and b4, c4, b4. And I think that these sort of positions are generally just going to be fine for black. Like I'm pretty comfortable playing with the very flexible structure and so forth. But I do think that long castles is a bit more of an annoying system. White has quite a lot of quite tricky tries here. I think the main trend nowadays is you just sack the pawn and you just kind of just play using the lead-in development and bishop pair. Just kind of making a point you just have some fairly good long-term compensation as white with fairly natural moves. So it makes sense in order to really play this at a high level. It's kind of important to make sure you know what you're doing as black. Not just after bishop d3, but like against the other, things that they might try as well. So yeah, that's kind of like the thing, like, am I really willing to, work really hard and, like, remember all of this theory when I'm, could just play, like, a less theoretical opening and probably still have decent results in bullet, where, like, the evaluation of position is not going to matter as much? That's sort of the question really to figure out, and I'm not so sure if I'm necessarily willing to go into all of these lines, but it does help that I have studied them before and have some decent ideas of looking in the past. So it's not like I would be looking at these lines, like, completely with, completely new, but, just sort of building on existing knowledge. Like, for example, I remember that back in the day when I was looking at this, like, after bishop c4, that, like, previously, they normally go for, like, bishop to e6, and, kind of just play, like, these sorts of positions, like knight c6, and, just kind of play chess from here. But I remember that Geary, I think, was also going for moves like queen c7, trying to be a little bit more flexible, where you could sort of put the knight on d7 rather than c6, just have that, little bit of extra flexibility in your setup, get a little bit more of a position to play. Because the thing with a Najdorf is, you do at least get a fighting position in a lot of these cases. There's not really a way for white to easily just trade off all the pieces and make an easy draw. So that's one thing that's quite appealing about it. I think a move like e6 I'm probably not as keen to play, because I think the plans we go like f4, g4, g5 are actually quite difficult for black to equalize against. So I think that, in this case, if they play like bishop e3 or bishop e2, I probably will just go for e5. Although I will admit, back when I was playing the Najdorf in the past, these were the positions I actually found the most awkward to play. Like, it's just so you don't really get an easy way to attack white. Like, you just get a very slow strategic battle. Like, for example, bishop e3, queen d3, and you yeah, you often just end up getting a position like this one, like knight d5, where white just kind of has the bishop pair and just sort of grinds away from here. No, it's true, like with a bit of homework, like say if I look into moves like knight e8, preparing the f5 break at the right time, probably I'd go bishop g5 and trade off the bishops before going f5. So yeah, with some homework I can resolve the challenge, but it's also a question like how much do I really enjoy these positions in the first place? Because I remember when I was a lot younger, I'd get these structures in the Sveshnikov and like in... Well, actually the first win I ever had against a Grandmaster in Blitz was actually in a like knight d5, ed5 Sveshnikov structure. So it is some merit to like, biting the bullet and sort of building up my knowledge of these positions. The thing is though, you also have to be ready for moves like king h1 and to have moves like rook e1 and... Well, I know that Anton Smirnov, he likes to play like queen d3 and this like bishop d2, where he's sort of trying to play for knight d5, but in a different version. It's something actually I was even considering covering in a chess-able course at some point for white. Like, it seemed a logical fit. But, yeah, you can sort of see how, like, white is, to some extent, getting to choose the sort of position that arises, where it's going to be a bit more strategic or a bit more tactical. And speaking of tactical, like, bishop g5 is, a very serious move for white. Actually, I remember, I think in some recent games, they were starting to play, like, queen f3 in some games, and sort of make the point that, maybe white is, not getting an e5 so directly, but he's still getting some pretty good piece play, like still definitely getting a, getting a position to play, like bishop a d3, rook e1, and you're okay. You have to like have some idea of what you're doing here as black. Like you can't just completely make it up in a situation like this. So yeah, but going back to f4, like I remember that what I used to do, like in 2018, is I would just play queen b6, and I'd basically just try to memorize the variations. Like just, I remember I would sort of play this like h6 and, play these sort of positions like knight fd7, and basically just memorized this theory like to the point where I felt pretty comfortable like that even against like a very strong GM, I'd still be able to like hold a, position like this, let's say. I know I'm jumping really fast past the line, but this was sort of the key position I was, just fairly happy to kind of play, like bishop d6, f5, and, just give back the exchange, but say you have a pretty solid position at the same time. The internet will say white's a bit better, but it, it comes to equality pretty fast if you, if you look a little bit further. But this is all the way I was playing it before, and yeah, I could still play it like this, but, moves like g4, for example, are kind of giving a strong attack, so I think it's not an absolutely ideal solution from the practical point of view. Like, I think trying to defend this as a bullet game is really kind of asking for trouble, is kind of my feeling. So I probably would end up going for some sort of shortcut, but the thing is, if you don't play queen b6, you are kind of just giving white good chance for an advantage, unless you play something like knight bd2, but yeah, not sure how I feel about allowing things like bishop c4 and, white just being able to just have like some quite nice development. I remember that, for example, Timur Kubakarov was like playing this a4 move quite a lot in the past and having some quite good results with. So, there are different like problem lines that are, practically very tricky. Like, for example, if you forget that queen a5 is a move, you're going to end up in a pretty, difficult position as black, let's say. It's funny I mentioned Timur, because actually his games are the ones that are coming up at first in the Elite Chess database, which, it shows value looking at the Elite Chess database, not just the Masters one. But I digress a bit. And okay, of course, you have to be ready for other things as well. Like, you have to be ready for all the sidelines, like bishop c4, h3. Okay, f4 is not so serious, but, moves like g3 exist, and bishop d3 is a decent shortcut. Just trying to get a position to play. There's sort of been a recent preference of some engines of late, where you just go f3 is kind of play this modified, like, dragon with, like, bishop d3 and a6 thrown in, which, hey, has its own subtleties that need to be studied. And yeah, I mean, even with like rook g1, yeah, I remember off the top of my head how you deal with this, but it, the fact is I can still play it, as it were. So, yeah, that's kind of one point, and like it's not just about, even the Sicilian, but it's also like the anti-Sicilians as well, which, okay, I've been playing the Sicilian as my main system almost since 2002 for the most part. So you can say, like, I'm fairly comfortable with stuff like f3 and... Well, I was recently working along the queen d4 line for white, as you saw in a somewhat recent video of mine, most likely. So, like, I'm reasonably comfortable in playing it, but it does still require a little work to, not just be ready for bishop b2, but, like, be ready for knight c3, bishop g5, e5, and, you get the idea. There's, like, different ways that white can play it that we need to be ready for in a sense. And even like the anti-Sicilians as well. Like I'll say that in 2018, I remember the reason I kind of was a bit put off playing the Najdorf at some point is I just found these sort of structures with D4 really annoying. Like just this kind of thing was just really bothered me a lot. Nowadays, though, it probably bothers me a bit less by comparison, where, yeah, there's still a lot of moves they can play, but yeah, overall, I feel kind of happier in these sort of positions that I did back in 2018. But it's true, like, if I was playing against really strong players, yeah, I would need to, of course, update my theoretical knowledge. Like, I know, for example, that back in, like, 2018, there were these subtleties like Rook C8 that hadn't really developed a lot of theory, but I think it now, have a lot more of a theoretical body to them. And that's the thing as well, like, when you play main lines, your opponent's just going to know the theory a lot better in general, so it kind of forces you to work harder also. And I mean, even moves like Castle's Bishop D3, like, obviously this is a setup as well, which, again, I'm not too concerned about, but, again, you have to have an idea of what you're doing. And I mean, stuff like C3, Knight C3, Bishop C4, okay, you can deal in a pretty common sense way for the most part. But I remember something that used to really annoy me a lot and kind of put me off playing the Najdorf a bit was actually the systems with Knight C3, because let's say you play D6. I remember that in online Blitz, like, I would just really, really struggle against F4. They would just go for this kind of attack, like Bishop C4, castles, and yeah, maybe the attack is not completely sound when they play like F5, but like you still have to know how to deal with it in a sense. Like after castles Queen H4, like you have to know some subtleties to make this work as black. Like, for example, we need to hit back in the center, and we need to then go knight to D4 or knight A5, and get rid of their bishops. They're not just mating us with F5 and this sort of thing. And if you forget this, then yeah, you could very easily just lose like a complete beginner from a position like this, as it actually happened to me a couple of times previously. So that's one thing I kind of found a little bit of a nuisance in some cases. But there's even other things as well, like they can play like knight G2 and play this delayed closed Indian where you have to know what you're doing in the knight F6 versions rather than like the E6 knight E7, G6 bishop G7 setups I tend to favor. So that's something you kind of have to know. And also, even something like D4 is kind of a recent trend that is, leads some quite dynamic positions. Like black has to basically play like somewhat directly to not end up in a worse position. Like the lines with like G6, this can, get very, very sharp very quickly from, like this is just the beginning of the theory where it gets very messy. And I mean, yeah, I could play a shortcut like say knight F6 and, go for D5. But I do think these sort of positions are also pretty safe for white. Like you are giving white, some chances to try to press a little bit when you, when you go for this kind of lazy approach, let's say. But maybe it's a reasonable solution, to play the knight off to sort of have a lot of these shortcuts prepared where I don't play like the absolute best line, but I sort of play a line that scores pretty well in the lead chess database. And this one does have a 59% win rate in the 500 plus lead chess game, so maybe I'm underestimating the practical utility of this line a bit, but yeah, but that's probably the way in which I would sort of construct it. Like I would sort of not just, let's say, play top engine line every line, but sort of look at what are the best scoring lines in the lead chess database, and probably use those to try to form a more practical repertoire, where I might be able to get away a little bit more of like forgetting the theory at some moments. I'm not having to, revise the theory every single week for bullet games, as it were. But yeah, I'm interested to know in the comments, like, what do you think? Do you think that I should play the Sicilian Najdorf, or, do some of the challenges I mentioned here kind of relate to, your chess game as well? Definitely interested to hear, your take on that in the comments below, and, yeah. And also, any feedback as well, like, if you are really enjoying this type of series, like, should I play this opening? I could definitely do more like it. Or if you prefer some of my older content, that's good to know as well, so I can give you more of that potentially. Whatever the case may be, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the training, and yeah, until I see you in the next one, take care.